Hi, I've had a couple of people ask me about doing the oil pan on the 6.0, so I'll show you the way that I do it here on them. First thing I want to do is after I make sure that it is the upper or lower oil pan seal, not a cam sensor, not a crank seal, not a cack hose, oil pressure switch, or oil filter housing, or anything else leaking, I'll loosen the radiator. I'll take out the 4 bolts up here holding this and the 2 in the shroud. That's the way I start off with before I hoist it up. Spray the exposed threads and remove the lower bolts, nuts off the engine mounts. The most common place for them to leak is on the passenger rear corner back here. So once you verify that, then let's go ahead and drain the oil. Need to get a straight shot to the crank pulley. So if you have to remove the steering stabilizer, this even works on the 05 and up 4-wheel drives. It's tight through here, but you can do it after taking the steering stabilizer off. If it is an automatic, before I raise the engine, I take my 10mm half-deep swivel snap-on, or it can be Matco or any of the other ones. They all make the same length. I'll take my socket, go through the second hole here, and get the bolt that holds the trans lines to the lower oil pan. Now we have the nut off of there. Take the pull jack and raise the engine up. It does not take a whole lot. We don't need a whole lot of clearance here. We do it both sides, we have it up. And also this is why we loosen the radiator up. That way we don't have regrets and end up buying a radiator. As you can see here, it lifted up with it. So I'm going to go ahead and undo the bolts on the oil pan to remove the oil pan. This is the setup I'm going to use right here. It's a Cornwell 1/4-inch drive. It has the 1/4-inch drive on the end too, but as far as I know, they quit making them. This company here is still in business, just about as good, a little bit shorter, and sometimes this lock gets in my way, but it's the only thing I found that's closer. And it's 8mm bolts or 5/16 to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the pan bolts. To get to the ones down the passenger side, it's a lot better if you go up through here to the hole in the bottom of the frame and get to them. You can reach it a whole lot easier. All of the bolts are the same size except for 5. Okay, with all the bolts loose, if it drops below, you got to kind of move away from the trans line. If it drops below the oil pan, you're going to be okay. Or not the oil pan, the transmission belt housing, you're going to be okay. I just take my 8mm on the ratchet. I'm loosening the pickup tube. Leave that inside and it'll slide right out the back now. Now I reach up and get the upper oil pan off here too and do all the seals. Now I'm going to loosen the remaining bolts down the middle here that hold the upper oil pan to the block. And just keep in mind that the back 2 back here, the very back 2, do not have the bolts where they go through the oil pan and up into here, in the same way with the front, except with the front you have 3. You have the 2 in the middle, same as in the back, and then the 1 over here on the passenger side. So I'm just going to undo these bolts and then take it down. A couple things I like to mention here. One, clean off your surface. It usually has a film on it, so make sure it gets nice and clean so your gasket has a good surface to bond, to adhere to, or seal against. No type of adhesive like silicone or anything is necessary. It's not required. You don't have any joints to where you need it. But what I want to point out here, this trigger wheel, this is where the crank pulses are sensed. It's also where it can sense number one. If you bend one of these, you're going to mess up the PCM's timing, because this is going, the amount of time it takes in between each one is how it knows the cylinder if it's misfiring or not. But also there's a gap in one of these, and that's how it senses number one. So if you damage this in any way, you'll either lose sync or have a rough running condition. So be careful here. It's not, it'll take quite a bit to damage it, but just don't be hitting it or abusing it. Does not call for or require silicone, but if you feel that you need some, put a real light coat just along the inside here to make sure that we keep the oil from getting out. Just a light coat just to help aid in case there's any imperfections. Make sure the oil pan is straight. I usually put it up against my toolbox or the hoist. Make sure it's straight within reason. This one's pretty good, and they usually are on these. You can't over torque them and warp them too bad because of the way it clamps down. And also on these, when the old gasket, the old paint comes off here, we may have an issue. So I do use a little bit of silicone along here too. Only on the front half for now, because I'm going to be reaching through the back. Also, you want to make sure that you use the right type of silicone. Silicone's made for different stuff, and the colors also mean something. So make sure that you use the right appropriate silicone, and not too much. Don't pile it on. Same thing, we're just going to do a thin layer right down here. Okay, I have this silicone on the front half here, just a light coat, and also of course inside of all the bolt holes, otherwise it doesn't do any good on the outside there. We've got the pickup screen laying down inside there, ready to install. They verify that the O-ring's still on here. Most of the time they will stay there, so we're good. I'm going to put the oil pan back up there. Get you up inside, get your pickup in there. Now add a little thin layer of the silicone across the back and bring it up. A couple pointers again, the longer bolts are the two back ones, the two front ones, and the one to the passenger side. And we're going to make sure we have every bolt started before we start to snug these up. So I'm going to go around and get them all started. Every bolt started by hand. I'm going to go ahead and tighten them up by hand. So I'll tell you, it's a whole lot easier to take the extra 5-10 minutes to tighten them by hand than it is to either drill out a broken bolt or cross-threaded bolt. Up while it's still suspended, while the engine's lifted up, and put your transmission cooler line bracket back on if it's an automatic. Tighten the radiator back down. Let's go drive this. Just got done road testing it, about 15 miles. Looks pretty good so far. So hopefully that helps you out. If you like my videos, please like and subscribe. Thank you.